My dear friends, there are moments, terrible, honest moments, when the soul cannot pretend, when the weight of sorrow becomes too much for the shoulders of mere mortals to bear, when prayers feel unanswered, and silence sits heavily in the space where we expected comfort. And in such moments we are tempted to ask, has God turned his face away? But I say to you, leave it in God's hands, not because it is easy, but because it is the only place where our pain is fully understood. He is not the God of indifference, but of intimacy. He does not sit aloof from our suffering. No, he enters into it. He too has wept. He too has cried out. Why? We are not forgotten in our pain. Quite the opposite. The very heart of God is attuned to the cry of the broken. He sees your tears before they fall. He hears the prayer you are too weary to speak aloud. And though you may feel hidden, your anguish is not unseen. Faith is not a feeling, it is a decision, to trust that the hands which formed the universe are still holding you, even when all seems dark. We may not understand the reasons behind the pain, but we are offered a refuge beyond understanding, a peace that does not make sense. So let us not be deceived by despair. For the Christian hope is not built on ease, but on the unshakable reality of a God who redeems even the deepest wound. Leave your grief, your questions, your longing in his hands, and rest, if only for a moment, in the knowledge that the one who made you also mourns with you, and in his perfect time will restore what has been broken. There is a great misunderstanding that often haunts the heart of the believer, the notion that when God is silent, he is absent. In times of pain, when the heavens feel like brass and our prayers return to us void, we are tempted to believe that we are abandoned. This belief is not born of truth, but of fear. We cry, we plead, we look for signs, and when none appear, we ask, "Where are you, Lord?" But silence is not the absence of God. It is, at times, the language of his deepest work within us. The history of faith is filled with long silences. Job sat in ashes for days, seeking answers. David, a man after God's own heart, cried in the Psalms, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever?" Even Christ on the cross cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" These are not cries of unbelief, but of honest hearts reaching toward heaven in anguish. Yet in every one of these stories, silence was not the end. It was the middle of transformation, of refining, of divine preparation. We must understand that God's silence is not punishment. It is not rejection. It is not neglect. It is, rather, an invitation to deeper trust. When a teacher is silent during a test, it is not because the teacher has left the room. It is because the teacher knows the student has already been given everything they need. In the same way, when God appears silent, it may be because he is inviting us to grow, learn to rely, to surrender without needing every answer. Silence becomes sacred space. It is the place where faith is tested, but also where faith is made pure. God's presence is not always loud or obvious. The world tells us that reality must be seen, touched, proven. But faith says otherwise. Faith believes that God is working behind the curtain, beyond our sight, beneath our pain. Consider a seed buried deep in the soil. There is no sound, no movement, no visible life. Yet something holy is happening beneath the surface. Roots are forming, foundations are being laid, and in time, life will break through. But for a season there is only silence, and still the gardener trusts the process. So must we. There are seasons when God draws us into quiet not to leave us, but to be closer to us than ever before. Sometimes we only listen when there is nothing left to hear but his whisper. We stop striving, stop demanding, and in the stillness we discover a depth of relationship that noise had drowned out. He meets us there, not in thunder or fire, but in the still small voice. And though the silence may be long, his nearness becomes undeniable. Often, we expect God to show up in dramatic rescue or miraculous resolution. But sometimes his rescue is not in the removal of pain, but in the sustenance through it. He gives us strength we didn't know we had, peace that makes no sense, courage in the face of confusion, and in those moments we realize something essential. God has not left. He is not unaware. He is sustaining, shaping, transforming. The silence has not been emptiness. It has been filled with his quiet work. There is also a mystery to God's ways that humbles us. We want answers. We want explanations, but God offers himself instead. He does not always explain the why, but he reveals the who. And when we see that it is he who walks with us, he who knows every tear, he who bore sorrow before we ever did, we begin to rest not in answers, but in presence. That is the heart of true faith, not knowing everything, but trusting the one who does. The waiting, the unanswered prayers, the confusion, they all serve a purpose we cannot yet see. Faith is not the absence of doubt, but the decision to trust in the midst of it. It is not pretending we are okay, but placing our broken pieces in the hands of the one who can restore them. And though we may not hear his voice right now, his silence is never indifferent. It is intentional. And it will not last forever. We must remember that God is the author of time. What feels delayed to us is perfectly timed to him. We rush, we panic, we want relief now. But he sees the end from the beginning. He knows what we do not, and in that knowledge he lovingly calls us to wait, to listen, to trust, even when the silence is deafening, because eventually the silence will break, the dawn will come, the answer will arrive. And when it does, we will look back and see that he was never far. He was never still. He was simply working in ways we could not yet perceive. So if you find yourself in the quiet, aching space where heaven feels far and God seems distant, take heart. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are being held. Trust in the silence. Believe in the unseen and leave it in God's hands. For though he may seem silent, he is never absent. His love is constant. His purpose is sure, and his presence is closer than your very breath. Tears are not a sign of weakness. They are a sacred language, a form of communication that bypasses words and speaks directly to the heart of God. In moments when pain becomes too deep for articulation, when the weight of sorrow crushes our ability to form coherent prayers, our tears begin to speak for us. They carry our grief, our confusion, our longing. And the incredible truth is that God hears every cry, every sob, every silent weep in the dark. Nothing escapes his notice. There is no tear that falls unseen, no groan that goes unheard. Human language is limited. Even the most eloquent prayers sometimes fall short of what we truly feel. But our tears say what our words cannot. They express the ache of loss, the sting of betrayal, the heaviness of waiting, the emptiness of loneliness. And in God's divine order, they are not discarded or ignored. The Psalms remind us that God collects our tears in his bottle, a poetic yet powerful image that shows just how much he values our sorrow. Not one tear is wasted. Each one is recorded, remembered, and carried close to his heart. We live in a world that often tells us to hide our emotions, to appear strong, to wipe away tears quickly and carry on. But God does not rush us through our grief. He invites us to bring it all before him, to weep openly in his presence, to lay bare the hurt that we've tried to bury. In doing so, we do not lose faith, we strengthen it. For it is an act of faith to cry before God, to believe that our pain matters to him, to trust that he is tender enough to hold what is too heavy for us. There is an intimacy in crying that draws us closer to God than we sometimes realize. It humbles us. It strips away the facades we wear. In our most vulnerable moments, we often experience God most personally. When we run out of strength to keep it together, he steps in to hold us. When we no longer have the words, the Spirit intercedes with groans that words cannot express. This is not weakness. This is communion. This is the sacred space where we encounter the God who knows us fully and still stays near. When Jesus wept at the tomb of Lazarus, it was not just a moment of sorrow. It was a divine declaration. God is not distant from our grief. He enters it. He weeps with us. The tears of Jesus were not theatrical. They were truthful. They showed the heart of God in full humanity and perfect divinity. If the Son of God could cry, could feel loss so deeply, then surely our tears are not unwelcome in the courts of heaven. They are received with compassion, with care, with comfort that only He can give. And yet there is more. Tears do not only speak of pain, they also water the soil of our growth. In ways we cannot see, tears purify, soften, and transform. They are a form of release, of surrender. When we cry out to God, we are giving Him access to the most tender parts of our hearts. We stop fighting alone, we let Him in. We allow the healer to begin His work, not always to remove the pain instantly, but to carry us through it, to shape us by it, to bring something holy out of something hard. It is also in our tears that we connect most deeply with others. Suffering, when shared, becomes a bridge. The tears you cry today may one day be the comfort you offer to someone else tomorrow. God does not waste sorrow. He uses it to build empathy, to deepen compassion, to create community among those who have walked through the fire and still hold on to faith. And so, while your tears are for now, they may be for someone else's healing later. That is the beauty of redemption. In seasons of unanswered prayers, long nights, and heavy silence, we may think our cries go unnoticed, but heaven is never deaf to desperation. Our tears are heard louder in the throne room than our most rehearsed prayers. They echo in the heart of the One who sees not just what we are going through, but who we are becoming through it. Our cries are not signs of abandonment, but of invitation. God calling us deeper, calling us closer, calling us to let Him carry what we cannot bear. We may not always receive instant answers. The storm may not end immediately, but there is peace in knowing that God is attentive, that He is moved by our brokenness, that He walks beside us through every valley. In time He will wipe every tear from our eyes, not with indifference, but with the gentlest hand of a loving Father who has been with us all along. Until then, cry if you must, let the tears fall, do not rush past them. For in each drop, God hears your heart. He listens, He cares, and He responds, not always in the way we expect, but always in the way we need. So leave your tears in God's hands. Let them fall into the soil of His grace. For in time, beauty will rise. Joy will return, and the same eyes that weep today will one day see the purpose behind every cry. In a world that constantly tells us to fight harder, try more, and never give up, the idea of surrender can sound like defeat. But in the kingdom of God, surrender is not weakness. It is the greatest strength. When we surrender, we are not giving up, we are giving over. We are laying down the illusion of control and placing our lives, our burdens, and our pain into the hands of the One who sees more, knows more, and loves more than we ever could. It is not a retreat, but a release. And in that release we find peace that striving could never bring. There comes a point in every journey of faith when human effort reaches its limit. No matter how hard we try, some battles cannot be won by sheer willpower. We push ourselves. We exhaust every resource. We stay up nights thinking of solutions, and still the mountain remains unmoved. It is in these moments that surrender is not only necessary, it is sacred. It is the soul's way of saying, God, I can't carry this, but I believe you can. And with those words the weight begins to lift, not always the circumstance, but the pressure, the fear, the internal storm. Surrender does not mean apathy. It does not mean that we stop caring or take no action. Instead, it is the act of trusting God more than we trust ourselves. It is the deep confidence that He is working, even when we can't see it. It is the willingness to loosen our grip, to let go of timelines, expectations, and outcomes, and to say, "Your will, not mine." That is not passive resignation. That is spiritual maturity. It takes great courage to release control and rest in God's sovereignty. One of the great paradoxes of faith is that we gain strength by surrendering. When we stop trying to manufacture peace on our own, we open ourselves to receive the peace that passes all understanding. When we stop trying to figure everything out, we begin to trust the one who already has. The burden of self-reliance is heavy. It wears us down, but the yoke of Christ is easy, and his burden is light, not because life becomes easy, but because we are no longer carrying it alone. There is incredible freedom in surrender. When we finally stop wrestling with God over our circumstances, we make room for his presence to work within us. We begin to see life not through the lens of fear, but through the lens of faith. We stop asking, "Why is this happening?" and start asking, "God, what are you doing in me through this?" That shift in perspective changes everything. It moves us from victim to vessel, from anxiety to assurance. And it's not because our situation changes instantly, but because we begin to change from within. So many of us are tired, not because of what we're carrying, but because of how tightly we're holding it. We are weary from trying to be strong all the time, but strength in the kingdom is not measured by how tightly we hold on, but by how willingly we let go. When we surrender, we allow God to be who he truly is, our defender, our provider, our healer, our guide. We stop trying to be the savior of our own story and trust the one who already wrote the ending. Think of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. In the most agonizing moment of his life, he knelt and prayed, "Not my will, but yours be done." That was not weakness. It was the ultimate act of strength. It was the Son of God surrendering to the Father's plan, even when it led through suffering. And yet, it was through that surrender that salvation came. There is power in letting go. There is purpose in yielding. And there is divine strength in choosing trust over control. Surrender often comes in the quiet moments, not the dramatic ones. It's the whispered prayer before bed, "God, I give this to you." It's the decision not to chase after something that's slipping away. It's the choice to forgive even when justice hasn't been served. It's the faith to say, "Even if nothing changes, I still believe you're good." These are the moments when heaven leans close, when God receives our offering of trust and begins to move in ways we could never orchestrate on our own. Surrender is also deeply personal. No one else can do it for you. It happens in the hidden places of the heart where only God sees. It requires honesty, vulnerability, and often tears. But it also brings a quiet strength that cannot be shaken. When you've surrendered your pain, your plans, and your future to God, nothing the world throws at you can steal your peace. You walk not in fear of what might come, but in faith in who is already there. So today, if you find yourself struggling, striving, holding on too tightly, pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, what am I trying to control that God is asking me to surrender? What fear am I holding that I need to place in his hands? What outcome am I chasing that I need to release? The path to peace is not in pushing harder, but in trusting deeper. Lay it down, let it go, and know that in surrender, you are not losing control. You are finally putting it where it belongs, in the hands of a God who sees all, knows all, and loves you through it all. Trust is not a feeling, it is a choice, a sacred and powerful decision to believe in God's goodness even when everything around us feels broken. So often, we wait for understanding to bring us peace. We say to ourselves, if I could just know why this is happening, I'd feel better. We want clarity, closure, reasons, but the truth is, healing rarely begins with understanding. It begins with trust. Real, raw, honest trust that says, "God, I don't get it, but I still believe you're with me." The human heart is always searching for meaning. In pain, it searches harder. We want explanations for our suffering. We want to see the blueprint, the full picture, the rationale behind every heartache. But God, in His mercy, often withholds the why, not to punish us, but to protect us. Because sometimes knowing the reason would not bring comfort. It might bring more confusion, more pain, or even pride. Instead of satisfying our need for understanding, God invites us to trust His heart when we cannot trace His hand. There is something sacred that happens when we choose trust over understanding. It opens the door for divine peace to enter. Not the kind of peace the world gives, a peace built on predictable outcomes and perfect plans, but the kind of peace that can only come from surrendering to a will greater than our own. Trust is an anchor in the storm. It does not stop the wind, but it holds us steady. It does not change our circumstances, but it changes the posture of our heart in the middle of those circumstances. When we insist on understanding before we trust, we make our peace conditional. We say, "I will only rest when I know." But what if we never know? What if the answer doesn't come in this lifetime? What then? True healing, the deep, soul-level kind, requires that we step into the unknown and say, "Even if I never understand, I will still trust you." That kind of faith moves mountains. That kind of trust builds unshakable character. It draws us closer to God, not because we've figured everything out, but because we've stopped needing to. There is freedom in letting go of the need to understand everything. The burden of trying to make sense of every heartbreak, every delay, every disappointment is too heavy for us to carry. We were never meant to bear the weight of the world's mysteries. That belongs to God. And when we release that burden, we make space in our souls for something better. His peace, His comfort, His healing presence. We make room for miracles, not always the kind that change our situation, but the kind that change us. Healing that comes through trust is deeper than healing that comes through explanations. Explanations reach the mind. Trust touches the soul. God wants to do more than inform you. He wants to transform you. And transformation often happens in the dark, where we cannot see the full picture, but we walk by faith anyway. We take one step at a time, guided not by clarity, but by confidence in His character. He has never failed us before. He won't start now. So many of us try to heal by overthinking, by analyzing, by replaying the past and imagining 100 different futures. But healing doesn't live there. Healing is not found in mental gymnastics or perfect reasoning. Healing is found in rest, and rest is the fruit of trust. When we trust God, we can stop striving. We can stop rehearsing our pain and start releasing it. We can take a deep breath and say, "God, I place this in your hands," and actually mean it. It's important to remember that trust is not always neat or easy. It can be messy. It can look like crying on the bathroom floor while whispering, "I still believe." It can look like silence when the words are gone, but the heart still reaches for God. It can look like showing up in prayer even when you feel nothing. That is trust. That is faith. And that is where healing begins. Not when everything is okay, but when we believe we're not alone, even in what's not okay. Sometimes the greatest miracles are not the ones we see on the outside, but the ones God performs within. The ability to smile again after heartbreak, the strength to forgive when you've been deeply hurt, the courage to keep hoping even when you've been disappointed. These are signs of a healed heart. And they often appear not because we finally understood why something happened, but because we chose to trust the one who allowed it. God does not promise that we will understand everything, but He does promise that He will never leave us. That is a promise we can build our lives on. That is a promise that heals. And as we walk through life's valleys, may we learn to lean not on our own understanding, but on the everlasting arms of the one who holds all things together. Because when we place our trust in Him, we discover a peace that doesn't depend on answers, and a healing that no human explanation can ever give. So don't wait for understanding to begin your healing. Don't delay your peace for the sake of reasons. Choose trust, even when it hurts, even when it's uncertain, even when everything in you wants to figure it out. Trust, and let that be the soil where your healing grows. In the end, you will find that trust was not a detour from healing. It was the path all along. My beloved friends, as we come to the close of this message, let us remember that we serve a God who is not distant from our pain, not blind to our tears, and not deaf to our cries. In every quiet moment, in every aching silence, in every tear that falls unnoticed by others, He is present, He is working, He is holding you even when you cannot feel it. His silence is not abandonment, His delays are not denials, and His stillness is not a void, but a deep well of mystery where faith is born and refined. We are not called to understand everything, but to trust in the one who understands it all. We are not asked to carry our pain alone, but to place it into the hands that carried the cross. Surrendering does not mean we are giving up. It means we are giving it to God, where it was always meant to be. Our struggles, our questions, our longings, each one becomes holy when laid at His feet. Let us walk forward not with the pressure to fix everything, but with the peace that comes from trusting the one who holds everything together. He sees your pain, He hears your cry, and in His perfect time and way, He will turn your mourning into joy, your ashes into beauty, and your burdens into blessings. So leave it all in God's hands, and in doing so, find the strength to stand, the courage to hope, and the quiet, unshakable peace of a heart held by grace.